take that one, she said, feeling the pup had chosen her. The old man reached down into the filthy pen and brought up the puppy by the scruff of the neck and turned it over. Got yourself a bastard, he stated, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he literally smiled. Regardless of its tacky coat, Janet cuddled the pup to her bosom like a newborn baby. The cobwebby box, she brought the pup home and went directly to the incinerator in the basement and the pup himself into the bathtub. Still, the weather was too chilly to hose it off outdoors, and she could clean the tub out with bleach once they were finished. The dirt came off in chunky layers, and already she was on her fourth fill of water. She hadn't even considered what may be underneath the filth, burrowing between the muck and skin, but soon found out. The poor puppy was plagued with a bad case of fleas, and his skin looked irritated and red. Remembering a suggestion from some time back in a woman's magazine, she washed him thoroughly with Dawn dish washing liquid to rid the critters. To her surprise, he took very well to his bath, as he should have. He must have been highly grateful, to say the least. You know what, little guy, she said sweetly. We have to give you a name, don't you think? Any suggestions? He looked at her with a tilted head, soulful eyes, and water dripping from the tips of his ears. Duke? Prince? Maxwell? Any of those strike you? The dog, as if understanding her, shook his body, dousing her with the brown water. All right, I can take a hint. What about Tobias? No? Well, maybe something a little less calming yet substantial. I think Apple, Orchard, Blossom, and Tree are out. Huh? Oh, wait, I know. What about Neville? Obviously excited over the name, he tried to jump from the tub and into her arms. Okay, Neville it is then. Neville Yardley, it's nice to make your acquaintance. Let's get you finished up so we can celebrate your new name and life. Once Neville's bath was over, which took most of the evening, she was pleased to see the tips from the magazine had worked. Nary a flea existed. And the lotion suggested by a local pharmacist seemed to have taken away some of the red and gave his tawny coat a healthier shine. For dinner, she fed him the best puppy food she could buy from the corner market, and he devoured every morsel she poured into the makeshift bowl, then asked for seconds. Not wanting to bloat the poor malnourished pup, she refrained his request and retired to the den, where she held him in her lap while watching updates on the trial of the century that had everyone in town buzzing. Janet didn't want to believe this man viciously slaughtered the mother of their children and her friend, but she had to admit that some of the evidence pointed darn close to him. To be truthful, she would rather believe he was set up and leave it at that. It seemed a little easier to take, she thought, and less eerie than thinking a famous athlete, hero and actor could carry out such a task and be so calm and confident as he sat in the courtroom. Janet fixed a box in the corner of the bedroom for her new tenant, placing inside an old yet comfortable fluffy blanket, thinking that Neville would take to it right away, but she was wrong. Neville was fine until she got herself into bed and turned off the lights. Then he began to whimper. She tried again and again to ignore his cries, but her heart couldn't stand the obvious loneliness the dog was voicing. After being in that small pen with 6 other dogs, it was understandable how alone he must have felt there in that box with no one else crowding him, no other body heat, no other heartbeats to lull him to sleep. Neville quickly found his favorite spot upon the bed with his mistress. It wasn't at the foot, where she would have preferred, but at the top with his head resting on the same pillow as her own. It wasn't that she didn't want him so close, but more that she was afraid she would roll over onto him during the night and never realize. Janet wasn't a thin woman. She was more what some would call pleasantly plump, but she saw herself as just plain fat, weighing in at 180 pounds. She'd always been cautious of her appearance. Be it her weight, her face, her clothes, or even the jewelry she wore, she was easy to criticize herself when looking into a mirror. Several times during the night, Neville had awakened Janet while kneading on her breast. The old man assured her the pup was weaned, so maybe this was his way of showing affection, or he was missing his poor, weak old mother. Still, she couldn't help but wonder if this is what a child would have felt like in her life. She had, at one time, wanted a baby, but because of her employment, their policy wouldn't have covered her should she become injured or needing time off. She had passed up the chance of childbirth for the assholes who had dumped her flat, and now it was too late to even consider the thought of becoming pregnant. Neville would have to fill that void in her heart. It was easy to see that Neville was a pampered pup. He had everything a dog could want and more. Janet had a box full of toys for him in what was once a spare bedroom and now a room of his own, complete with a bed, mattress, and cover in his favorite color of red. She watched in amazement over the months as Neville developed into a canine of stature. Remembering the frail runt of the litter he was not so long ago, she would have never guessed he would grow to the dog he was rapidly becoming. According to his paws, he still had more growing to do. Neville was an obedient pooch, picking up almost instantly on her commands. Only once had he messed in her home, and that was only because she hadn't taken him out before going to the market to do her weekly shopping. Had she known a dog was so well behaved, she would have acquired one long ago. But then again, maybe Neville wasn't your typical dog. Yes, that seemed more logical, especially after all the horror stories she's heard over the years. Especially those Christmas puppies people had gotten or given to their children. Neville was an exceptional dog. He never chewed on anything but his rawhide bone. This dog, she thought proudly, was special. He did have one flaw that couldn't be broken nor understood. Wanting to be a good owner, Janet made several appointments for him to see his vet and get checked, but every time she took him toward the car on his leash, he would fight her with all his might, refusing to get inside until she gave up from exhaustion. She never pushed him, thinking as far as he continued to grow and appeared healthy, maybe there wasn't any need for him to see a doctor. It wasn't that he had a fear of the car. Heavens no. Neville was one who loved to go for rides, especially in the country, but somehow he knew when their destination was not to his liking. Thanks to Neville and their daily walks, Janet found her clothes becoming loose. Each week she would go down to the basement and open another box of saved clothing, a size smaller than the last. She was also attracting attention from passers-by, which boosted her ego a few notches. Even the townspeople seemed to be more benevolent toward her, stopping her to talk and inquiring about the horse of a dog that would walk her around. Her new look changed her attitude toward life and toward herself. She found herself wanting to do more and take better care of her home, inside and out. Toward the end of summer, she prepared a strip in the front lawn and planted bulbs galore that would hopefully blossom next spring into a garden of lovely flowers. For the first time in almost a decade, Janet found she had extraordinary amounts of energy, and she owed it all to Neville, the wonder dog, her companion and guardian, the latter becoming somewhat of a problem. While Neville continued to sprout, so did his protectiveness toward his mistress. The slightest noise outside the home would send Neville into a frenzy of beats, threatening barks that often frightened Janet, even if she was expecting them. As autumn set in, Neville was given yet another possession, a muzzle. Lately, when they would walk into town, even the people Neville had once been friendly with, he was now nipping at. Because of his size, he was also becoming harder to control every day. Janet feared he may one day yank himself from her clutches and run amok, biting everyone in sight, and she didn't want that to happen. Neville was merely guarding his mistress, wanting no harm to come to her, and so that she always felt safe, no matter if it was day or night.